Lamsa's Jeffersonian Bible. In a troubling echo of Thomas Jefferson's infamous meddling with Scripture, George Lamsa crafted his own distorted version of the Bible, stripping away its divine essence under the guise of translation. Just as our founding father Jefferson crudely hacked out all miracles and supernatural events from the Gospels to create a so-called rational moral guide, Lamsa takes a sneakier path. Instead of outright deleting these profound occurrences, he twists and reinterprets them through dubious Aramaic lenses, turning miracles into mundane idioms or cultural misunderstandings. This approach reeks of intellectual arrogance, diluting the Bible's sacred power into something palatable for skeptics. Lamsa's work bears the heavy fingerprints of biblical higher criticism, that flawed academic trend which dissects holy texts like mere human literature, questioning their authenticity and divine inspiration. Influenced by this corrosive school of thought, he peddles a Bible that undermines traditional faith, promoting a watered-down spirituality devoid of awe-inspiring wonders. Critics rightly lambast his methods as unreliable, pointing to his over-reliance on the Peshitta manuscript while ignoring broader scholarly consensus. His claims of Aramaic primacy come across as contrived excuses to rewrite uncomfortable truths, leaving believers with a hollow shell of Scripture that prioritizes human reason over godly revelation. This Jeffersonian-style tampering raises serious alarms about fidelity to the original message, inviting doubt and division among the faithful. Lamsa's Bible, far from enlightening, risks leading astray those seeking genuine spiritual depth, all while masquerading as an authoritative alternative. It's a stark reminder of how personal agendas can corrupt even the holiest of endeavors. Delving deeper into Lamsa's problematic reinterpretations, he frequently rationalizes supernatural miracles as mere natural phenomena, psychological tricks, or outdated cultural expressions. This systematic demystification erodes the Bible's miraculous core, reducing divine interventions to everyday occurrences that any skeptic could dismiss. For instance, in the account of Jacob wrestling with a divine being in Genesis chapter 32, traditionally seen as an encounter with an angel or God resulting in a hip injury, Lamsa insists it was just a physical fight with his brother Esau, with the injury stemming from ordinary human conflict rather than any heavenly touch. This comes from his commentary in a book on Old Testament insights based on ancient Aramaic texts from the mid-20th century. Similarly, in the healing of Simon Peter's mother-in-law from a fever in Luke chapter 4, where Jesus traditionally restores her instantly through divine power so she can serve, Lamsa downplays it as a minor illness she simply ignored by getting up to work, allowing her body to recover naturally without lingering on the sickness. This notion appears in his writings about Jesus in the context of his own cultural and linguistic background from the early 1970s. Across various healing stories, like those in Matthew chapter 8, Mark chapter 1, and their parallels, where Jesus is said to cure the sick through supernatural means, Lamsa claims Jesus lacked any real divine healing ability and instead offered comforting words that psychologically spurred recovery only in those with strong faith. He portrays these as selective natural processes, leaving many unhealed and frustrated, with only a handful benefiting from belief-induced improvements out of crowds seeking aid, as detailed in the same book. Even in Acts chapter 8, where the Spirit supposedly transports Philip away after a baptism, appearing elsewhere miraculously, Lamsa reduces it to Philip hastily departing on foot or by normal travel, reappearing through everyday means. This explanation shows up in his guide to biblical idioms and key gospel insights from the mid-20th century. Lamsa's broader pattern in his Old Testament commentaries often applies such natural excuses to other events, like portraying the parting of waters in Exodus chapter 14 not as a divine miracle at the Red Sea, but as winds naturally shifting marshy reeds in a shallow area, though he ties fewer explicit miracle denials to specific verses beyond the Genesis example. Lamsa's distortions extend alarmingly to accounts of demonic possession and afflictions, where he outright denies the existence of literal evil spirits or personal demons, recasting them as archaic terms for mental illnesses, insanity, or misguided thoughts. This denial strips away the Bible's warnings about spiritual warfare, turning profound battles against darkness into trivial psychological issues that undermine the reality of evil forces. Generally across the Gospels, references to demons, evil spirits, or unclean spirits possessing people are, in Lamsa's view, just idioms for insanity, harmful desires, or wrong practices, purely mental afflictions without any supernatural element. Unclean spirits specifically denote lunatics, or those with psychological disorders, as explained in his book On Jesus from the early 1970s and his New Testament commentary from the mid-40s. In the story of the Gerasene demoniac in Matthew chapter 8 and its parallels in Mark chapter 5 and Luke chapter 8, where a man or men are possessed by a legion of demons that then enter and drown swine, Lamsa calls the afflicted a lunatic with severe mental turmoil, not spiritual oppression, and the swine episode a natural panic of animals fleeing into water. This is reflected in his Aramaic-based Bible translation from the 1930s and 50s, with notes in his New Testament commentary labeling it as lunatics and swine. For the man with an unclean spirit in the synagogue in Mark chapter 1 and Luke chapter 4, who cries out before the spirit is cast out, Lamsa sees it as insanity or a disorder like epilepsy, with the casting out merely an idiom for calming through reassurance. Similar notes appear in his Bible and Idioms book under unclean spirit explanations. In Mark chapter 3, where demons fall before Jesus and confess him, Lamsa treats them as insane people blurting delusions in a crowd of the afflicted, per his translation notes on the insane confessing Jesus. The boy with a mute and deaf spirit causing convulsions in Mark chapter 9 is redefined as epilepsy or mental illness, with the spirit term just idiomatic for the natural condition, cured via faith's calming effect, as in his translation notes on the spirit of dumbness and deafness. In Luke chapter 4, demons exiting many while crying Jesus is the Son of God become insane men with delusions resolving naturally, or through hysteria, labeled as insane men confessing Jesus in notes. Mary Magdalene's 7 demons in Luke chapter 8 are 7 psychological disorders or wrong thoughts, not actual entities, per notes on 7 devils. The disciples' power over demons in Luke chapter 9 is authority to heal the insane and lunatics naturally, paired with disease cures, under insane lunatics notes. In Acts chapter 8, unclean spirits crying out as they leave many are just mental symptoms easing through suggestion, not true exorcisms, as per evil spirits notes. Lamsa even rationalizes Satan as mere error or opposition, not a personal being, in his writings on earthly kingdom concepts from the mid-20th century. These ideas carry a Nestorian flavor through his Aramaic lens, yet they also echo troubling Jewish interpretations of Adam and Eve's story, where evil is reduced to an internal human impulse or inclination, concepts that seeped from Talmudic eras into modern thought, portraying sin as psychological rather than a literal adversarial force. However, This stance blatantly contradicts the doctrines of his own Assyrian Church of the East, which upheld belief in actual miracles and a personified Satan as a real entity, not some allegorical flaw in humanity, making Lamsa's deviations all the more divisive and unfaithful to his professed heritage, while prioritizing cultural rationalizations over literal supernatural truths and further eroding the Bible's foundational spiritual realities.